Introduction of my bio from 2013. It's probably on me. I need to update. I was at the New York Comedy Festival's Funniest Up-and-Coming Comedians in 2014. I've also been on a little show called The Joe Rogan Experience. More recently. What? It's not a big deal. Who's counting? 7 times. Anyway. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Hey, did Joe say she's teaching a sex class in the middle of that weird question about that? That was a good talk, but I kind of want to hear that lecture. Well, I've had a great time here so far, and I've been having a great time traveling around the country, going to a lot of these LP state conventions. And the first thing I try to say to everybody is I get a lot of people coming up to me and thanking me for what I do and my podcast, and a lot of people say I introduced them to these ideas or to the party, and I appreciate all of those people. But I try to say to everyone at every one of these stops that I make, very sincerely from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you to everybody in this room for what you're doing, because it really is important. And I know it's not always fun, and sometimes it's a little bit treacherous, and sometimes you're voting on an amendment to amend the amendment, and that takes a while. But you guys, this is really important, so thank you to all of you guys for Okay, so I want to try to get through what I want to say as quick as possible, because I want to take as many questions as I can, because I really enjoy that part of this. Okay, so I am so excited about the Libertarian Party and the potential that we have and what we can accomplish in the very near future. I think we have an unbelievable opportunity in front of us right now, and as much as the tradition of the Libertarian Party is amazing, the philosophy that we sit upon is incredible. This is the party of Ron Paul and Harry Brown, and I am honored to be a member of that party. That has nothing to do with why we have an unbelievable opportunity. Nothing. The reason why we have an incredible opportunity in front of us right now is because every single major institution in the United States of America is completely distrusted by the American people. Their support has evaporated. This is an opening that we need to exploit. Now, why is it? I mean, I don't think anyone here would argue with me. Does anyone disagree that the support for every institution in this country has evaporated? No, we all know that. You can see that in the job approval ratings of the politicians. You can see that in the trust ratings of the corporate press. Why has it evaporated? Well, here's the obvious answer. Because the 21st century has been an unmitigated disaster, an absolute disaster. And the government and the corporate press and academia and Hollywood and every power center in this country has been wrong about everything. And people are waking up to this. So very quickly, just going over, the 21st century is 22 years old now. What have the ruling elite in this country given the American people? What have we gotten in the 21st century? Well, we got 9/11. We got the rise of the national security apparatus, the war on terror, disastrous everywhere that it's gone. We got the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. We got the Obama years. I don't even know what to say about them. Bush's third and fourth term. And then we got the rise of the Trumpist populist right, and we got the COVID regime. That's what the American people have been given in the 21st century. As much as we could probably all go over what the problems in the 1990s were, it kind of makes you long for the 1990s. Like, what was it? Clinton got a blowjob or something? I'll probably take that over everything we have right now. But to go over it kind of quickly, so in the year 2000, George W. Bush is elected president. And he was really elected president on a fairly reasonable campaign. You know, George W. Bush, if you remember what he campaigned on in the year 2000, I know there's young people here who probably don't even remember any of this, but let me tell you, kids in your 20s, God, it's so weird not being that, but no matter how I act, I am a father pushing 40. All right, so George W. Bush, and the people who are my age or older in the room, you can back me up on this. In the year 2000, or the year 1999, when he was running, George Bush ran on a humble foreign policy. I swear to God, this is real. He said that the military should never be used for nation building. It should only be used for defense of our country. This is true. He ran against the big government policies of Bill Clinton in the 90s, said that the Republicans were going to bring fiscal sanity, balance the budget. This was George W. Bush. He was the son of a president who had already been on there, and America, by the narrowest of margins, which I think, if you don't actually believe that a bunch of Jews voted for Pat Buchanan, probably wasn't actually right, but he gets it. And in the year 2000, and this is long forgotten now, but George Bush inherited a bubble bursting. It's what was known as the dot-com bubble. And it burst right on his watch, right when he came in to office. And so this was a problem for a new president. And he could have, if he was, you know, a decent person, or had ever read a book, maybe he would have said, well, this is because of problems in the 90s and we built up a bubble and now we have to deal with the pain. But he didn't do that, and instead, Alan Greenspan, his Fed chairman, lowered interest rates to, at the time, drastically low rates. Drastically low. I believe they went to around 2% for the Fed fund rate, which, yeah, I know, again, kids, that sounds like, holy shit, 2%, like that's insane. But at the time, like Joe mentioned before, the interest rates used to be very high to rein in the inflation of the 70s. We had a Fed fund rate at 20%, okay? Good luck reining in this inflation right now with our big hike up to 1/4 of a point. So this is what they did, they lowered interest rates, so no problem, right? And then the pain of the bubble bursting really wasn't felt. And in fact, 2000 was smoothed out to some degree. And then in 2001, 9/11 happened. And so, of course, as everyone knows, the story of 9/11 is that these crazy Islamic fanatics attacked America because we were rich and free, and we had never done nothing to them. And they just hated our freedom so much that they got just freedom over there. And so they just, somewhere in the deserts of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden stumbled upon a copy of the Bill of Rights. And he was like, this just makes me so mad that I'm gonna go attack America because of their freedom. So they came over and attacked us for our freedom. And after 9/11, of course, people were very worried about the economic ramifications of that, so they lowered interest rates even more. And then George W. Bush decided to launch the War on Terror, and that was all. There was no war tax. There was no increase in any type of taxes over this. This was all deficit financed. And so in order to finance that deficit, we kept those interest rates low. But that's free. There's no problem to be associated with that. Except a couple things. Number one, when he launched the war in Afghanistan, and he could have trapped Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora in late 2001, a couple months after 9/11, they decided to let him go. So they let Osama bin Laden escape from Afghanistan into Pakistan so that they could continue the war on terror, which they really wanted in Iraq. And so they continued the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And in Afghanistan, they decided, instead of just being there on a mission to destroy Al-Qaeda and to get Osama bin Laden, we're going to let Osama bin Laden go. What we really need to do there is fight a regime change war against the Taliban. Because if there's one thing we all know, regime change wars in Afghanistan always work. So, only took like 20 years, but Okay, so then he went and fought the war in Iraq. Both, of course, as you guys know, worked out to be complete disasters. But those interest rates had to stay low in order to finance all of this. But they did have this one slight side effect, which is that when interest rates were incredibly low, that sucked a lot of people into the housing market because it was a great time to buy a house, even at an adjustable rate mortgage. And the prices of houses were going up every year, so this was no problem. In 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, this was incredible. And in fact, they were bragging about the record high home sales. You know, look at this. We're fighting a war on terror. We dealt with 9/11, and we still have a thriving economy. Because that's how it seems during the boom. So in 2008, we had the worst economic crash and financial crisis since the Great Depression. That's what the American people got. According to the Federal Reserve, between 2007 and 2010, 40% of American wealth was lost. The median net worth went down 40%. You know, you think about, like, why is this country so unstable today? Why is everybody devolving into their tribalism? Why is the culture spinning out of control? Why is everybody out at each other's throats? Maybe this is a good place to look at the start of it. Imagine being a family of 4 and losing 40% of your net worth. So the country reacted against this. And what was the most anti-George W. Bush thing they could have? Well, it was Barack Hussein Obama, the junior senator who was preaching an anti-George W. Bush message. He said he was going to restore habeas corpus, and he was going to close Guantanamo Bay, and he was going to end all of the wars, and he was going to make us a proud country again. And so the American people in overwhelming numbers went with him. And he came into record high approval ratings. George W. Bush immediately after 9/11 might have had higher, but in Obama's first few days, it was just the whole country was behind him. Approval numbers that you couldn't imagine today. I think close to 80%. Double check me on that, but they were incredibly high, well over 70%. And what did Obama do? Well, after the crash in 2008, the Federal Reserve responded by bringing interest rates down to 0%. And they kept him there for years. And of course, on top of that, Obama also had record high government spending. And this was the solution to the crash, right? We won't feel it quite as hard if everybody can get free money, which, by the way, they also didn't want to lend out to most regular people because they were a risk, so who really got the free money was the big banks. But they got their free money, and there's record high government spending, so now the numbers look a little bit better. The stock market looks a little bit better. The employment numbers look a little bit better. Oh, look, jobs are coming back. I mean, sure, you used to be an executive and now you work at Starbucks, but you still have a job. So who really recovered in the great Obama recovery? Well, you can see this. It's not like an opinion or even debatable. If you ever look at a map of the country where the richest districts in the country are, you know where they are? They're all outside Washington, D.C. and New York City. It's all the suburbs around there. Now this ain't capitalism. There's no big factories in Washington, D.C. and New York City. That's not the reason why the richest districts are outside of there. Why is it? It's artificially low interest rates and record high government spending. The politically connected around Washington, D.C. have all become millionaires. And the people speculating in a zero interest rate environment, they've all become millionaires and many billionaires. That's where the money's going. So that 40% loss in net worth for the average American person, they didn't recover. Who recovered were the millionaires and billionaires. So often you see these kind of like debates, and it'll be between, say, like someone on like the Bernie Sanders left versus someone on the Ben Shapiro right. And the debate will be, the Bernie Sanders left person will say, the government should redistribute money from the rich to the poor. And then the Ben Shapiro right will say, no, the government should stay out of that, and we should have a free market. But in reality, what's happening is that the government is transferring money from the poor and working class to the millionaire and billionaire class. And that's something that libertarians should talk about and explain that we oppose that. That's what we want to put an end to. So the whole Obama recovery is a complete farce. but they're selling it like this was some great progressive victory because gay marriage is legal now. Which, I'm all for gay marriage being legal, I don't have a problem with that, but it wasn't really, that wasn't really Obama's mandate. In fact, when he came in, he said he was going to end the wars and close Gitmo and help, heal the economy, and actually he said that marriage should always stay between a man and a woman because of his deep-rooted belief in Jesus. Like, that's what he ran on, and that's not what he gave us. So now the American people, who were so furious at George W. Bush that they would elect Barack Obama, are now so furious at Barack Obama that they're like, well, what can we get? What can we get to be a middle finger against this whole system? And then entered the best middle finger in the history of middle fingers, which was this orange cartoon character who just pissed everybody off. And I'll admit, he pissed off all the right people. I mean, he just destroyed the Bushes and the Clintons, and the American people loved it. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of them hated it too, but a lot of them loved it. And this was supposed to be the correction of the establishment of this whole system. And this is basically what Trump ran on. I mean, if you peel away kind of like the insults and the stupid tweets and all of that, the center of his message was the country's falling apart. I mean, what was Make America Great Again, other than hey, we used to be great, now we suck, what the hell? How to make us great again? And this appealed to a lot of people, tens of millions of Americans. Now, what was the problem? Well, the problem was that Trump was a bloviating, ignoramus narcissist who has never read one book about anything, ever. He just goes off gut, and he's just like, well, I think I'm terrific, and we'll do it, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so he, as my good friend Scott Horton always says, the country needed Ron Paul, but we got Donald Trump. And so, of course, Donald Trump was a complete disaster from the beginning. And he really was only concerned with his own legacy, and it all turned out to be a complete disaster. And the entire establishment turned against him. And they were all freaked out because from their perspective, he was a complete repudiation of them, which was true. But from anyone else's perspective who wanted a repudiation of the system, he didn't have the first clue on how to do it, and I don't think he really had the moral convictions to want to do it. And then Donald Trump faced the biggest test of his life, which was this microscopic germ that, I guess came from a lab in China, I don't know, that evidently Fauci created. And so, not literally, but funded it. And when that moment came, Donald Trump had no idea what to do and completely folded and declared the state of emergency and authorized the NDDA and just completely was rolled by all of the governors. And 2020 ended up being the worst year in modern American history for most American people. Certainly the worst year in the 21st century. So after all of this disaster, and then they put in the guy who is supposed to be the anti-establishment guy, it ends in his last year as president in 700,000 small businesses being closed, tens of millions of Americans on government assistance, tens of millions of Americans being deemed non-essential, millions of children having their lives completely interrupted, mental health issues through the roof, all of it, as you guys know. So that's the last year of the guy who was supposed to clean all this up, the guy who was supposed to be the response to the disastrous policies of the 21st century. And so what were the Americans left with? Well, they basically had the establishment pick their dinosaur, who they convinced to hide in his basement for 6 months, to carry him over the finish line. And now the establishment got one more chance, and they're back to continuing their policies. And what do you see all around you? Disaster. And where are Biden's approval ratings? In the toilet. Only compared to Kamala Harris's approval ratings. So his approval ratings look even decent. And that's the state of America right now, okay? Now, in this environment, Americans all across the country are looking for alternatives. You see it everywhere. Why do you think Joe Rogan, let me rephrase that. Why do you think my close friend, Joe Rogan, has more viewers on every podcast than all of the corporate press combined times 10? Because people are looking for something else. They're looking for anything, Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro or whoever else it is. They're looking for something. Whether it's Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, the American people know that this system is failing miserably and that the country's spinning out of control and that all of a sudden we're at each other's throats. And of course the ruling elite are, with every chance they get, encouraging that more and more. Blame each other. Don't look up and blame the system. Everyone fight amongst themselves. You know, we have to all go to war over what gendered bathrooms we have here, because that's the real problem in America today. But the American people are looking everywhere. So the issue is that what we need them to find Paul, they need Harry Brown. They need the real answers to these questions, which is that we don't need to embrace the radical socialist left or the radical populist nationalist right. What we need is the Bill of Rights. What we need is liberty. And the lack of liberty has caused all of these problems, and an increase in liberty will solve them. That's our job. That's the
Dave Smith.
Well, maybe. I gotta say, the guy makes a good point. The kindest heckle I've ever gotten. What the country needs is you. You make a good point, sir. Well, listen, what they need is us. It's not me, it's what we're all here fighting for. And so this is the thing, okay? And what's happening now is that the country has become so destabilized, and there's this rise of totalitarianism across the entire Western world, which I refer to as the COVID regime, which, you know, you can call it whatever you want to, the lockdowns, mandates, we've now gotten to a point where the culture is completely spun out of control. The debt is out of control. The currency is being completely destroyed. And we have now had, the president said over the last 2 years, that governors can declare the Bill of Rights null and void. That's what we're up against. Just a couple months ago in Canada, we had a populist working class uprising squashed by an authoritarian government, invoking unprecedented emergency powers. And they also just started seizing people's bank accounts. No due process, no day in court. Government just seizes your bank accounts. You can prove that you were innocent later. Good luck with that. And that was urged on by the sitting president of the United States. Don't get it twisted. What we are up against is a real threat, and it's unlike anything we have faced in modern first world countries in the last 50 years. That's what we're up against. Now, at the same time as we're up against something this serious, we have the best opportunity we've ever had. Libertarians right now, we don't have to rely on the corporate press the way we used to. They don't have a monopoly on information anymore. We can go on all of these alternative shows. We can reach an audience that we never could have before. I can get on Joe Rogan's podcast and talk to an audience 20 times bigger than what CNN has. We don't need to be in the presidential debates anymore. We don't need to beg to be up on their stage. I dream of a day when the Libertarian Party is invited to the presidential debates because we're making so much noise that they're like, man, we need you in these presidential debates. And we say, we'll see if we can make it. We'll let you know if we can fit it into our schedule. That's where this party's mentality should be. But I will submit this. I think that if we can recognize the severity of what we're up against and the enormous opportunity that we have right now, then we need to stop spending our time and energy fighting each other. We need to come together and realize the significance of this moment and all work as one, as people who believe in human liberty. We're all on the same team. And above that, I believe in human liberty. And I think that should be the order for everyone. I love the Libertarian Party. I love the Mises Caucus because I believe they're effective vehicles toward achieving human liberty. And if they weren't, I'd leave them both because that's what I actually care about. We need to be led by principles first and by what we're facing and trying to defeat first. And all of this tribalism and sectarianism and all of this, it's at this point, we need to understand that we can have competing visions for what this party should be. And we can have a good, fair, honest competition. But we don't need to make our highest priority fighting amongst each other because the stakes are just too high right now. I'll say this. Reno's coming up in a little over a month. The end of next month, we're gonna go to Reno, and I think a lot of this can be settled there. You know, I think there's going to be a shakeup in the Libertarian Party, and I think this will change things in many ways. But I hope that everybody knows, and this is specifically speaking to people outside of the Mises Caucus, that if you are a good libertarian, if you believe in human freedom, if you oppose the COVID restrictions, if you oppose the warfare state, the national security apparatus, the police state, the war on drugs, if you want to reduce regulation and taxes, you want to reduce the war on guns, all of these things, you have a home here. We love you and we want to work with you. I don't care what's wrong with you. It's so funny because, like, look, I love libertarians. I really do. I mean, I don't always feel that way when I'm on Twitter, but like when I come here and talk to you people, I love you. It's just a bunch of cool, great people. You know, you go on Twitter, you're like, I fucking hate these people. And you come here and you're like, I love everyone. Listen, I love left-wingers who are good on like one issue. You know what I mean? You're like one left-winger who sucks on everything, and then they're like, yeah, but I'm anti-war. And you're like, that is so cool. You're anti-war. You know, picture like the worst right-wing populist nationalists you could think of, and they're just like terrible on all these things, and then if they just got up in a speech and they were like, we should end the Fed, you'd be like, that's so awesome. You know, but then you find libertarians, we agree on like 95% of stuff, and we fight over the other 5%. We gotta get over that, we gotta grow up, we gotta focus on the big issues that really matter, and kind of come together on that. This is what I say, I've been saying this for 2 years straight now, I say this at every single speech that I give, and I still get a bunch of people online who are like, Dave wants to take over and purge the party of all the people he doesn't agree with. I promise you I don't, and I promise you no one in the Mises Caucus is gonna do that because I said so. All right. And then the last thing I'll say, and because I want to hopefully have time for some questions and stuff, is that I think that the most important thing libertarians can focus on, and this is from your personal life to all the way up to like if you're speaking to like, you know, 1 billion people, anywhere from speaking to 2 people to 1 billion people. I think that what libertarians do at their best is what Ron Paul did against Giuliani in the 2008 debate, and what Harry Browne did when he put out, in my opinion, the greatest piece of libertarian writing in the history of history. The second greatest piece of American writing after the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence is Harry Browne's piece titled, When Will We Learn? And if anyone doesn't know what that is, I really encourage you to go read that. Harry Browne wrote this amazing piece about 9/11 titled, When Will We Learn? And it was all about how basically we caused this by just accepting the fact that our military could just bomb innocent civilians in the Muslim world for decades, prop up brutal dictators, all the best stuff. The same argument Ron Paul was making against Giuliani, except the piece, When Will We Learn, was written or published on September 12th, 2001, which is just like the bravest thing in the freaking world. And again, you young people, you may not even understand. If you picture the environment right now, like let's say with what's going on with Putin and the Ukraine, if you were to be like, well, I actually think Putin was provoked, or something like that. You might get some blowback. Or if you imagine, like, if you were saying, like, a year ago, I don't really think you should take a vaccine, and you get some pushback, older people back me up on this. That was nothing compared to 9/11. Compared to the day after 9/11, saying that actually the terrorists have a legitimate gripe and that the military have kind of been the bad guys in this fight was so brave you can't even put it into words. But that's our legacy. That's the tradition of our party. That was our presidential nominee who said that. And that's what libertarians need to do going forward. You know, I know and I understand that it's a criticism of the Mises Caucus also often, that someone said something inappropriate, someone went too far, someone was shit posting or something like that. And I get it. Oftentimes, I'll never admit this to you publicly, but I agree. And behind the scenes, kind of be like, all right, tone it down here or there. But that's not the most important issue. What the most, look, libertarians, we don't have any real political power. I know, like, even in Pennsylvania, they would brag we have the most, elected libertarians, and that's great, but it's like a bunch of dog catchers, basically. I mean, let's be honest with each other. I'm not trying to downplay it. It's great. I want a libertarian dog catcher. I'm just saying, we do not, as a party, exercise real political power. What do we have? We have our message. We have the truth. And if you have that, if what you really have is your message, then the most important thing is to tell the truth when it really matters. When it's the hardest thing to tell. And so the best example I can think of that today, right now, is the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, where Joe Biden is saying in his State of the Union that Vladimir Putin has led an unprovoked attack against Ukraine. And it's like, yeah, it's completely unprovoked. I'm sure it's not at all a provocation that we overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014. And installed a pro-Western government, right? Like, we wouldn't think of that as a provocation if Vladimir Putin overthrew the government of Montreal and installed a pro-Russian government and then sent them in a bunch of weapons over the next 10 years, 8 years. Would we think of that as a provocation? No, we wouldn't. What did you say? It's not true?
Trudeau.
Trudeau. Oh, I would actually appreciate if he overthrew. That was, by the way, an excellent counterpoint. If he overthrew Trudeau and installed a pro-Russian government, I'd be like, all right, that's half good. How pro-Russian is this new government? But the truth is that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, NATO was up to Germany. And that was always the line drawn in Europe, was right down the middle of Germany. And then, in the years following, with every presidential administration, after promising to not go an inch to the east, we're up to Russia's borders. Hillary Clinton once said that Vladimir Putin has brought his military right up to NATO's doorstep. And by that she meant the borders of Russia. Now, I am not justifying what Vladimir Putin has done, and I know that there are a few people who are my opposition in this party who will claim that I have, but if they're going to claim that, then I would submit that they are also accusing Harry Brown of justifying what Al-Qaeda did. This is dumb, binary, CNN garbage, dishonest attacks that should have no place in our movement. I'm not justifying what Vladimir Putin did. He's a monster. He's killing innocent people in the Ukraine, and it's horrible. But to claim that it's an unprovoked attack is just not true. And it's our job to tell the American people the truth when it matters, when it's going to get you called all the names. And this is going to be my final thought, and I think this is something that is a big divide between different camps within the Libertarian Party. Now, there are some people, and I think this is why a lot of people oppose what the Mises Caucus does, because they kind of look at it like this. This is what our camp refers to as the blue pill, red pill distinction, which I know some people don't like that terminology. I think it's very useful, but there's one group of libertarians who have this attitude, and I understand on the surface why they have it. They say, look, if you talk the way you're talking, then the entire corporate press is going to call you a Putin-supporting, racist, bigot, transphobe, Nazi, and then everyone's going to think we're Putin-supporting, racist, bigot, transphobe Nazis. And I kind of understand where they're coming from. That seems like, how could we win if everyone thinks we're that, you know? But here's how I see it. If we ever get to a point where we are actually making noise and actually might have some success, it is a guarantee that the corporate press will call us Putin-loving, racist, bigot, transphobe Nazis. I promise you, it doesn't matter that we're not. They will still call us that. What did they call every single libertarian who actually was somewhat successful? All of those things. So, we have two choices. We can either accept that we're going to get called the mean names and brush it off and deal with it, or we can avoid being called the mean names, in which case we might as well just quit now, because we will never be successful in any way if we're not willing to be called every bad name in the book by the corporate press. All right, so that's my speech. I'd love to take some questions if anybody has any.